to the rabbit hole that is reality. We aim to engage, to inform and to inspire with a social commentary and topical talk of the week's goings on, which really should have us asking questions. Rabbit hole that is reality.co.uk is the place to go, where you can find information produced on every episode so far. You can listen, watch and download each episode too, and every Thursday 8 PM on the UK Collapse Radio Network you can tune into the premiere of the rabbit hole that is reality. A big thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with us here tonight. As always, the question is, where do we start? Because there really is so much out there that really defines itself as the reality of which is just truly a rabbit hole. But I think start with something personal is always a good thing. My book, which still doesn't have a title to be honest, is indeed going to Google Books. The book is roundabout finished and it's going to be going through some drafts over the coming weeks. Honestly, I've actually put on a bit of hold at the moment just so I can get the rabbit hole that is reality episode 19 completed, and also complete a few of the projects I've got going on at the present time as well. Talking of other projects, I was quite honoured in fact. I have been requested to film and record a documentary and conduct interviews at what is called a day for Patricia Crowther. And she was one of the last few remaining contemporaries of Gerald Gardner, and that is for the Centre for Pagan Studies and the Doran Valiente Foundation. Also, this has taken place at the Masonic Temples Hall of Nottingham, which is a Grand Lodge of Freemasonry. And I have been told that I'll have free walking of the entire temple. Certainly an opportunity not to be missed, considering I'm going to have my camera with me. Sylvia tells me that she's currently working on a script for an audio novel book production that she's been working on, and that will take place recording wise over the next year or so, which sounds to be a lot of fun. So in regards to the video version of the rabbit hole that is reality, I will draw your attention to episodes 18 and even 17 over on YouTube, but we've been experimenting with title sequences and graphics and stuff over the audio version of the show, which, seems to be okay, seems to work quite well. But really it's just a case of experimenting, finding out what works, what doesn't work, what we can, what we can't do, and seeing where the ball runs, really. So as we stated back in episode 16, Rabbit Hole That Is Reality Volume 1 will end at episode 20, and Volume 2 will begin from episode 21. That's no different to any of the major magazines that are out there, say National Geographic and so on, who obviously they run a 24 issue volume really, and then it goes to the next volume number and so on. That happens to all the major publications. And radio shows that are run for a year, they do that as well. They tend to archive them in years, and you'll see from their audio properties they call it volume 1, volume 2 and so on. We're just doing no different. We're just choosing to end it at 20 and then continue with 21 and so on, with a video version to supplement it as well. That will obviously have the full audio as you can hear here. There'll be pictures, there'll be videos, there'll be stuff that you can see in the studio here. So let's see where it takes us. On the show tonight we're going to be talking about how the UK media has become alarmed at a government bill that allows the seizure of journalists' notes and sources. And do you think the police would infiltrate peaceful protests just to turn them into riots, intentionally? And why is the Western media silent to the revolution that has happened in Tunisia? Do you want to go beyond being an armchair activist? We're sure you do. There's plenty of things going on in the world that we can all do better than what we're doing right now. The first of all is, how can we go practical? We started last week. We taught you how. We showed you how to become more empowered in yourself. This week we're going to be engaging those practical steps as well. What you should be doing next. We're going to be talking about the internet. Practical steps. We're going to be talking campaigns that are active and need your support. Help raise the profile and awareness of them. We're going to be looking at recommended listening and watching as well. Plus a look at the mysteries and the tales of the Fatian that are really happening in our world today. This is your 1 hour dose of information, engagement and inspiration. This is The Rabbit Hole That Is Reality, episode 19. So where are we going to start today? We're going to start in the political forum, perhaps. Let's check out the Transparency of Lobbying, Non-Party Campaigning and Trade Union Administration Act 2014. It's a government bill sponsored by Andrew Lanzi. He is the head of the House of Commons, and Lord Wallace Tankinus of the Cabinet Office. Now you're going to go, what the hell is that? That sounds like a really complicated name, and it is. Probably complicated for a reason. It's also known in the press circles as the lobbying bill and also the gagging bill, with good reason, I might add. So let's have a talk about this first, and we're going to talk about how bad it is, what could be good about it, and guess what? It's already received royal ascension. It's already been made into law. It was actually made into law on the 30th of January. So let's talk about this. In fact, The Guardian did a really good job of actually bringing this up to our public attention. Unfortunately, no one seemed to notice. And those who did notice were talking about it only in the parliamentary pages instead of sharing the story about. But why is this? Why do these kind of things go through? Why do these things go through so fast through Parliament on purpose? It's to get them in and out as quick as possible and to get them brought into law so no one can talk about it. Now, this is actually what's happening. Charities really have expressed their disappointment after the government's bill has been squeezed through. Now, this is what it's intended to do. It will limit the freedom of speech in the run-up to an election. Voluntary groups, trade unions particularly have been affected by this. They are campaigning against the legislation, branded it a gagging bill, because it would impose restrictions on how much can be done campaign-wise the year before an election. Now, ministers were forced to back down on several areas over this. Now, Graham Allen, who's actually my local MP, my local Labour MP, now he was in charge of scrutinising the bill. Now, he accused ministers of presenting a dog's breakfast. However, the government won 2 votes on 2 amendments of this and tied down, which means a bulk of the original proposal has been passed into law. Now, go and check this out, because I highly recommend you do. Because there's a lot of things in there what are clearly are going to create a bureaucratic nightmare. Now, Liz Hutchins, she was a senior campaigner for the Friends of the Earth, and she says it's a bad day for anyone looking to protect the environment, save a hospital, and oppose tuition fees. In fact, you cannot even campaign. You cannot even, bring awareness. You cannot do a public protest against something in the year before an election. You what? Yes, that's been brought into law. You cannot campaign against anything because it could be considered to be political leaning and therefore thus against the law now. Now, ASVO, they'll be monitoring the impact of the bill. This was said by Sir Stephen Bubb, who's the Chief Executive of the Association of Chief Executives of the Voluntary Organisations sector. Now, it says, we'll work closely with members to give advice on its implications and we'll continue to educate for political parties to revise this bill in light of the evidence going towards the 2015 election. We must be clear, civil society must never lose its voice. We must stand up for our beliefs and refute self-censorship. Now, he says this is now Tankinus, the Lord Wallace of Tankinus. Now he says he's denied that this will be burdensome and denied the fact that it will actually have such a bad impact. And he argues that very few third-party organisations are going to get caught up in the new laws at all. Really? Is that really? Well, Greenpeace is saying completely the opposite, aren't they? Let's have a look over the Greenpeace website and just talk about what they're talking about in regards to this lobbying and the gagging bill that is brought now into law. The UK lobbying industry is a £2 billion anti-democratic power base, providing influence over legislation to businesses with the means to pay for it. There are plenty of good reasons for businesses to provide the government with their views, but when arms firms are lobbying to have corruption investigations abandoned, car firms are lobbying to have weakening pollution controls, and also absolute minimum we need to do to ensure we live in a real democracy is transparency. No one needs to be shut out of the public debate, and this is really bad for this. On the positive side, the new bill has a provision to compiling a public register of lobbyists. However, it will only include 20% of people working for the lobbying firms. So, for instance, you only get the administrators on the downstairs floor, not the people who are actually pushing the buttons upstairs and demanding that bills go ahead, and also the ones paying for it. Which probably means we're never actually going to see who the true puppet masters really are still. Now, specifically, the amounts that charities, unions and campaign groups are allowed to spend during the 12 months before an election, which may have a political impact, must be cut by 60%, it is saying in this bill. At the same time, a definition of electoral expenses must be broadened, with the cost of an election-related leaflets, posters and so on awareness and transparency of staff wages overhead, so the reduced budget will now have a lot more to cover. This says it's more bureaucratic burden, particularly on small local campaign groups, and the bewildering lack of clarity in which aspects of which activities count as being electoral. For instance, even the Electoral Commission has gone on to describe how these changes are completely and utterly unworkable. Imagine there you are as Help the Heroes. You're lobbying for better prosthetic limbs for military veterans. In the year before an election, you're not allowed to do that. What about the guys who were climbing the Shard recently in regards to the dangers of oil drilling in the Arctic? Could that be considered an electoral expense? Is that even considered political? Of course it is. That's illegal. NSPCC, of course, lobbying for legal protection of children who are in care. No, it doesn't matter. You can't do it. In the year before an election, you dare say anything like that, it's illegal. You're going to be arrested. You're going to be put in jail. Who knows what's going to happen to you? And this is what we're up against now. This is, like I said, this has been brought into law. This is now in effect. All we can do now is stand up and say this is wrong. But it looks like Cameron, of course, is changing society for his big society. And of course his big society is part of the bigger plan. And that is related to the UN, the European Union, and likely Agenda 21. Let's talk about the revolution that's not in the media right now. And in all fairness, that's strictly speaking, that's not true. There is a couple of blurbs out there, but nothing major. Nothing major at all. So let's talk about this. This goes out to Tunisia. Now, Tunisia actually is predominantly an Islamic country. And when I saw this, I was like, well, this actually is a positive step in the right direction, especially when it comes to democracy. This week, Tunisia passed a historic constitution that is heralded as the most progressive and monumental document ever happened in the Arab world. Now, here's why. And let's have a quick look at this. Let's look at the watchdog.net, and then we'll look at some other references about this. Now, in regards to this massive, the revolutionary constitution, it guarantees equality between men and women, a constitutional mandate for environmental protection, only the third country in the world to do so, a declaration that healthcare is a human right with preventative care and treatment for every citizen, a democracy with civilian law that respects freedom of religion, a established right to due process and protection from torture. So in one stroke, Tunisia has now become more democratic than many Western countries have been for years. This literally is a revolution in terms of democracy and a victory for human rights. And I think this sets a prime example for the Arab world, which this literally is on the cusp of, is right in the mix there. So, I mean, we've got like decades of dictatorship, 2 years of arguments and compromises, and Tunisians, you know, have finally nailed out this constitution, laying the foundations for democracy. Now, in the UK, the US, and various Western countries, there's endless debates, whether you're watching whatever news channel you look at, to be honest. It's been often being called crony capitalism, where it's an anti-democracy and so on. And some of the things we talk about, not just on Rabbit Hole's Reality, whether it be UK Collapse, whether it be UK Column, whether it be to InfoWars, a lot of the independent media out there. And what is being told is certainly an anti-democratic perspective that we're putting, that is being, you know, blinkered over us. But this, I think this marks a revolutionary step forward in the way that democracy is. And I really hope the likes of the UN take note of this. And in fact, the UN Secretary General himself, Ban Ki-moon, says Tunisia can be a model to other people who are seeking reforms in their country. Now I was looking at a lot of the parts of this. When we're talking about the freedom of religion, now of course this is, as I said, an Islamic state. This is an Islamic state where the Islamic State does not control the government. I think that's very, very important. Say when we look at, say, Egypt as a prime example. In the last 2 years, I mean, Egypt has wrote like 2 constitutions. There's been military coups against the elected government. You know, Egypt, they created a charter that was drafted and appointed committees, but there was no debate about it. There was no input. There was no assembly at all. And in fact, but in Tunisia, the same period of time has passed, and they've actually wrote a roadmap for their political future. And that really is probably the basis of how a constitution should take place. And that makes a difference to returning stability. You know, you're talking about investment, you're talking about the economy, you're talking about communicating with allied countries. Tunisia is well placed to be a platform for the West to look at and go, this is how we could improve a country. The Middle East can look at it. This is a great way for us to communicate with the rest of the world. Perfect. I think this is an ideal situation for all involved can benefit from looking at this. Or whether we're looking at it from an economic point of view, or whether we're looking at it from a society point of view, and a democratic point of view. This really is a progressive constitution. Well done, guys. Well done. There's certainly been a lot of talk in regards to social services intervention into the family unit. And in fact, we've seen lots of stories in regards to where the social services authorities have failed to get involved and take action in regards to certain families. A good example would be, say, Baby P, who came out, the story of that, where social services were involved to a degree, but did not stop the effect happening. This story takes that to a different level, in fact. We're talking about social workers now, who have the ability to take children from their families who overfeed them. Now, I think in a society where we have right now, where we have abundance, well, what's the word for it? No, we have rampant consumerism. So food appears in abundance, should I say. You can't help but go in the supermarket, you see, I work in one, I see this all the time. You see, kids will demand everything, and the parents always give in. And it's absolutely true. Everyone knows that their advertisers' key benefit to getting them to buy the product they're trying to sell is to sell it via the child. If a child wants something, parents will go out of their way to give it to them, because the parent believes it is their responsibility. As I said, parents feel that it is their need to provide that for their child. Now, whether that be an Xbox One, whether it be a PlayStation 4, or whether it be a sweets at the checkout, I want a pack of mini eggs or whatever, I want a pack of sweets, the parent will always give it to them. It's almost out of kindness that the parent thinks that they're giving it to the child. In our consumer society, the parent thinks it's part of what they should do. In the UK, and certainly in America, you will see children who are obese, morbidly obese. I mean, I've seen children walk around like the supermarket I work in, about 10 years old, and these kids are like huge. They must be like 12 stone. And it's just like, wow, you can't say anything. You feel you need to. But I think with what we've got an obesity epidemic happening. If you look at the figures, in fact, NHS hospitals are dealing with 1,000 cases a day of child obesity. In fact, I think this is actually a reversal of a problem. I can remember when I was younger, and there was lots of stories who were children who were undernourished. As of now, of course, we've got the opposite. Children are now nourished too much. So, and I think social workers are finding youngsters being fed on a high-fat, sugary diet, which is not just bad for your health. What I also don't think giving them sugar-free food, with aspartame, and the likes of sodium benzoate in your food, is better either. I think it's just a case of getting them hell off the sofa and getting them out there and doing some exercise. But if a child craves unhealthy food, a loving parent feels unable to say no, is really what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way. And I think you've got some complex decisions to make. A family's overeating can be the biggest factor that leads to them losing their children now. Now, a Daily Express survey, which is what I'm looking at, of councils found in the last 5 years, children were taken from their families for the reason, 2 in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, 1 in Oxfordshire, 1 in Salford, and 1 in Hounslow, London. And also further cases in Sheffield, Portsmouth, Lincolnshire, Slough, Harrow, London. Their children are being taken out away from their parents due to the fact that the child is so obese. One social worker says, as quoted here, only in one extreme case will we see a child taken into care because of their weight, as one would need to work with the family first to improve the eating habits. So maybe also there's the parents aren't choosing to be safe for their children. There was a TV show, I can't remember what it's called, something like year before last, where a TV celebrity, kind of nutritionist, would get involved with the family and would then show them pictures of what their children would look like 20 and 30 years down the line. And of course, usually what would happen is the mother would cry and father would cry, and then they would seek to change that behaviour over the course of a couple of weeks. Actually made for quite gripping television, in fact. So let's look at some more broader pictures. The nation's obesity problem has also been uncovered in figures from hospitals in England showing there were 356,072 individual care sessions last year where the patient was deemed to be suffering from obesity or an illness relating from thought to be being too fat. It's the first time the NHS has released such statistics in a way that shows how the nation's bulging waistlines, I'm not exactly the Atlas figure that I used to be, but this is putting extra stress on hospitals and doctors and GPs and limited resources. There's comments here from Conservative MP Priti Patel, said 45 youngsters aged 17 or under had fat-fighting operations in the last 5 years in his constituency alone. There is an obesity crisis, and the health services, councils and government must take a joined-up approach on how to resolve it. Looking at the Department of Health spokesman says that England has the highest rates of obesity in the Western world, and it's causing dangerous and life-limiting health conditions such as type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Now, it really isn't a matter for the government. We just look at industry itself, health professionals, voluntary groups, who are to work together jointly to improve individuals' chances of improving their diet and their lifestyles. I actually personally believe, obviously I'm a state now, obviously I'm endeavouring to lose weight as well. It comes down to really the person wanting to make a difference. If their immediate support structure, their friends and their family, are actually actively getting involved with, hey, you need to do something. We need to hit the gym together, let's go out for a run together. Let's just do some crunches on the floor. Let's just do some press-ups against the wall. Anything to increase your heart rate, anything to help you motivated as an individual, to make you feel better. And when you start seeing results, or when you see your friends improving their circumstances, it actually gives you a nudge to make you go, I can do it too. That is the support network that also needs to be encouraged and shared. Because when we work together, there's no end to what people can achieve. I was having a conversation with my friend John earlier today, not long before I first started recording in fact, and he was talking about how people can no longer peacefully protest without fear of arrest. Now, strictly speaking, he's kind of right and wrong, and I really wanted to talk about this tonight, so put some notes together and also found out some resources on the web, because also it's about being proactive. If we need to know the actual ins and outs of what we can and can't do, instead of sitting there bitching about it, let's go and find out what we can and can't do, right? Let's find out for sure. So, in regards to the law on the web, this is the UK's legal information website. It's featured in the Times, Telegraph, BBC, ITV, The Independent. They tend to use this as a source of their knowledge, as their website proudly states. So, what is the right to peacefully protest? And let's have a look down this, okay? So, marching, demonstrating, and human rights. Now, I don't know about you, but of course, we all support peaceful protest, whether that be campaigning for the rights of firemen at the moment, regards to the fact that the teachers need support, whether we're talking about how the NHS is under drastic attack from privatisation, and no one seems to give a flying fuck. It almost seems like it's damn intentional, and I'm pretty damn sure it is. With environmental issues and so on. So, what can and can't we do? So, there are actually many times in history also where protest is used to great effect about changing the world around us. But some unfortunately see it like a public nuisance. A good example would be the Occupy Wall Street in the US, or the Occupy camps here in this country. There was seen to be a public annoyance, a situation that therefore hostility and violence unfortunately broke out in some of those cases. But the right to protest in the UK, in fact, is restricted somewhat in UK modern law. It even states it's on here. And it's not uncommon to hear calls to tighten those restrictions even more so. Fortunately, we have a right to peaceful protest in the UK, and this is guaranteed under a number of articles in the European Convention of Human Rights. That'll be the one that the UK government is trying to free us from. That's right, remember the UK government actually doesn't want us to be under the European Convention of Human Rights. In fact, they are campaigning heavily against it. And in fact, if you've seen some of them on bills going through Parliament, they're really trying to set us free from this. So, but this particular one is Article 10, the right to the freedom of expression, and Article 11, that is the right to peaceful assembly. In fact, you may remember a few weeks ago when I reported the fact that I went into Wetherspoons and I was told that groups of 4 people or more cannot come in. at any one time. To which I literally emailed the CEO asking for clarification of this, even though he told the reply I got from their customer services team was it may have just been an overzealous security guard and not the manager's policy as was told to me by the guy on the door. But who knows? So yeah, we can do this, we can protest, we can organise stuff, and we are allowed to. So please do so. Barton must have been a prime example as well, and where we're campaigning against the fracking situation that's going on. If you are organising a protest, it does say, admittedly you don't need to necessarily inform the authorities, but doing so can actually save you unnecessary trouble and difficulties from arising on the day. It's quite likely police will actually cooperate if they have enough advance warning of what to expect. There's a clear point of contact between the organisers of a protest. It's more likely to reassure them that the provisions of those organising the protest have adequate considerations to those making everything go smoothly. It may also turn out that you might need to acquire a permit for a protest in an area you wish to protest, which could lead to your protest being shut down. So it's worthy contacting the police to find out whether you actually need one. But also bear in mind, by informing the police, it may cause them to restrict or prevent your protest from even getting started. So make sure any communication you have with the police can be used against you in a court of law if the police decide to charge you for organising an illegal demonstration. No. So challenging police conditions is something we can do. The police do have powers under the law to impose restrictions on protests. However, these restrictions are unique to each individual case, and your rights give you the option to appeal against any restrictions that the police have attempted to put on you, and therefore to make your right to protest. If you believe there are unfair restrictions being placed on your protest, or the protest has been banned from occurring altogether, you can make a case on one of three grounds. The decision-making process behind the restrictions was unsatisfactory. For example, if false or assumed information was factored into the decision. The restrictions could contravene the right to protest, given all under the European Convention of Human Rights, if police decided that the message behind the protest was too unsavoury to be allowed, thus violating Article 10. The decision is otherwise completely unreasonable or irrational. For example, a schoolboy organising a protest against the closure of his local library, or being banned by police for the fear of an outbreak of public disorder. Police can only place restrictions on a protest or demonstration if they have reason to believe that it could result in property damage, disruption of the community, or serious public disorder. Judicial challenges against these restrictions can be made only at the highest high court in the country. The restrictions may be imposed a little too late for judicial challenge to be possible. And if you choose to go ahead with the protest in spite of these restrictions, you and your fellow protesters could find yourself placed under arrest. However, if the charge is brought against any protesters and it is found that the restrictions supporting those charges was unreasonable, the charges will be dropped and arrested protesters can be awarded compensation. So what would happen if you are at a protest, you're doing it peacefully, doing your thing, and then you are stopped and searched? Well, in fact, the police powers to stop and search you at a protest are the same as they are anywhere else. Police can only stop you and search an individual if they have reasonable cause to do so. And just because you're present at a protest does not constitute reasonable cause. So please take these into effect. If you are planning a protest, you're planning an organisational event where you're planning to walk and peacefully protest and state your claim against something you feel is unfair or wrong rather with other people, take note of certain things. Take note of the European Commission of Human Rights in regards to Article 10 and Article 11. Do peaceful protest. Make sure you organise properly and correctly, for these things will actually help you out a great deal long term, not just short term in the protest, particularly if there's been arrests or certain police have come into effect and events have occurred. Make sure you know what your rights are. Being educated in these aspects is actually vitally important, especially if you're going to take it to a practical level and go out there and protest. Okay, so we've come up on the half an hour marks here, so it's time to take a pause, take a break, go get yourself coffee, get yourself a brew, listen to some good music, listen to some good messages, and we'll see you on on the other side.
Gary's cat is missing.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you. Have you seen my cat?
Hang on, you don't know Gary, do you? Well, don't worry then. You can forget about things that don't affect you, like with a new Peugeot 208.
You just love over-advertising, how there's always that secret message in there that you're actually supposed to listen to besides the advert.
Well, don't worry then. You can forget about things that don't affect you.
This is called advertising lullaby. Keeping in mind, of course, that the whole purpose of advertising is to lull you to sleep. Quality, value, style, service, selection, convenience, economy, savings, performance, experience, hospitality, low rates, friendly service, name brands, easy terms, affordable prices, money-back guarantee, free installation. Free admission, free appraisal, free alterations, free delivery, free estimates, free home trial, and free parking. No cash, no problem, no kidding. No fuss, no muss, no risk, no obligation, no red tape, no down payment, no entry fee, no hidden charges, no purchase necessary, no one will call on you, no payments or interest till September. But limited time only, though, so act now, order today, send no money, offer good while supplies last, 2 to a customer, each item sold separately, batteries not included, mileage may vary, all sales are final, allow 6 weeks for delivery, some items not available, some assembly required, some restrictions may apply. So come on in. Come on in. Come on in for a free demonstration and a free consultation with our friendly professional staff. Our experienced and knowledgeable sales representatives will help you make a selection that's just right for you and just right for your budget. And say, don't forget to pick up your free gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet pocket pencil sharpener. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you. And if you act now, we'll include an extra added free complimentary bonus gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet, combination key ring, magnifying glass, and garden hose in a genuine imitation leather-style carrying case with authentic vinyl trim. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you. Actually, it's our way of saying bend over just a little bit farther so we can stick this big advertising dick up your ass a little bit deeper. A little bit deeper. A little bit deeper. You miserable, no good fucking consumer asshole. Because you do know, folks, living in this country, you're bound to know that every time you're exposed to advertising, you realize once again that America's leading industry, America's most profitable business, is still the manufacture, packaging, distribution, and marketing of bullshit.
The rabbit hole that is reality. Across the spectrum of topical talk, news that raises an eyebrow, science, technology, the environment, mysteries, strange tales, and the poutine that is both informative and entertaining. As you spread our wings and catch our stride, you can find us now on the web, rabbitholethatisreality.co.uk, where you can listen, download, and watch all the episodes produced so far. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/rabbitholethatisreality, and follow the presenters on Twitter @DefineChristian and @Sylvia Dragoon for commentary, insight, and conversation. This is the rabbit hole that is reality. Welcome back to the rabbit hole that is reality. My name is Kristian Lander, and this is the other side. This is the other side of episode 19. So what are we going to be talking about on this side of the break? I'm going to be joined a little bit later by Sylvia Wicks, where we come to have a discussion on whether pet ownership in the future is actually sustainable. We're also hopefully going to be talking to Ashley, who was one of the primary kind of de facto founders of Occupy Nottingham, in regards to a news story that broke yesterday. I'm really hoping to get his comments. I've been waiting for him quite a bit today, and we're already at 9 o'clock, so we might have to just squeeze the story in and get an interview with him perhaps on the next episode. So we want to kind of continue the discussion what we had before the break. That was the practical sides, the knowledge side of protesting. But this side is actually about practical steps you can take yourself right now, in fact, for yourself when it comes to the internet, and also your knowledge. We actually want you to engage these actions to improve your knowledge of the internet and how you can protect yourself, your friends, your family, your work colleagues, and many more. Particularly also when it comes to discussing the kind of topics that we are discussing here, when it comes to the bigger picture, shall we say. And also, a little bit later, we're going to be talking about the 14 stories that have caught our eye in the news. Of course, we keep an eye on the discoveries, the mysteries, and also the strange, quirky stories that have happened in our news the last couple of weeks. And we've got some corkers to show you. All this coming up on this side of the rabbit hole that is reality, episode 19. Okay, so let's just run with this story. This was a wrongly convicted activist, John Jordan. He claims the Met helped plan a serious civil disorder, and an independent inquiry is now vital to this. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be happening. Now, this also links to a story that goes live tonight. In fact, if you go over to the UK Collapse Facebook group, the story is up now. Let's go and have a look, and I shall tell you what the headline is. This was police psychopath caught on camera framing innocent fracking protester for DUI. Now, how does this tie into this story? Well, in fact, of course, you don't know what the story is yet. This is how the police are infiltrating protest groups in order to make them look bad, not only for the general public, but also basically to break the group from the inside. Like fifth column style from the inside. And it's actually very successful, which is the reason why I wanted comments from the guys who were based at Occupy Nottingham, who also found that this was a case within their own camp. So now we've laid the groundwork and a few pointers out there, you kind of know where we're going to go with this story, so let's kind of draw it all together. Now, recently we found out the police in fact have a little group on Facebook, again, shown up as an exclusive via from Scriptonite of the UK Collapse Network. She's revealed that the police in fact have their own private page where they boast about their busts, as it were, and also the violence that they have, and the racist secret underbelly that underlies with many officers out there. The Stephen Lawrence inquiry, for instance, we learned that the police are institutionally racist. How long is it going to be before we'll find they are institutionally corrupt? Now, it's been a month now since the latest undercover policing scandal has become deeper and wider, and we've got new twists being thrown into this. Now, if you've been following the story of the likes of Rob Evans and Paul Lewis, they've got a book coming out called Undercover that is as gripping as any thriller you're ever going to find, but this one happens to be true, that police and spies and undercover operations in regards to how they're shutting down their own investigations. Now, it's no secret the British police have been inserting undercover officers into protest movements since at least the 60s. Their purpose was to counter what is called subversion, otherwise known as domestic extremism, which they define as seeking to prevent something from happening or to change legislation or domestic policy outside of the normal democratic process, which is really a good description of how all progress changes have ever happened. Now, most groups whose infiltration has been exposed were non-violent. Amongst them there was the famous British campaign against apartheid in South Africa, where protest movements against climate change, people seeking to expose police corruption, and campaigning for justice against murdered teenager Stephen Lawrence. Undercover officers often used the stolen identities of dead children, worked their way into key positions, and helped to organise demonstrations. They in fact even started several long-term relationships with people they were spying on, and at least in many stories, even fathered children to them. Now, some officers have illegally used false identities in court as well. Some acted as agent provocateurs. Seldom did they do anything to be operating in the wider interests of society. They collected intelligence on trade unionists that were passed to an agency which compiled unlawful blacklists for construction companies, which famously was highlighted in the Red and Black 2 protest last year. I consider remember meeting a few people from the socialist movement who were out on Nottingham's Market Square campaigning about this. Now, these blacklists, which are completely unlawful, were being used to make sure that if you have a union kind of sway or you're a left sway, you wouldn't be able to find work in the construction industry. Now, the policeman who infiltrated like the Stephen Lawrence campaign, he was instructed by his superiors to hunt for disinformation that would undermine him. And when their tour of duty was over, the police abandoned their partners, and they reassumed their identities, and they disappeared from the life that they were living, which left another trail of broken lives. The unofficial motto, apparently, of the undercover squad stated it was to operate by any means necessary. This, in fact, this continues the story, as the revelations so far have led to 56 people having their cases and convictions overturned. Police and prosecutors have failed to disclose that officers had actually planned to help and execute protests, which people were then going to be prosecuted. We know of 11 spies, 11 out of the 150 plus working over this 46 years, so thousands of people actually might have been falsely prosecuted. Isn't it also interesting, say, on an American slant there, of how the operators of alleged terrorist acts have often been assisted by the likes of the FBI and the CIA. There's been numerous cases of that in the last few years. Why is it that certain gates are opened at a certain time, cases are passed to people, then a case occurs in which the FBI then stops? It's found out, in fact, that the FBI were actually passing and feeding this person information. Of course, you've got to make sure you're getting the money for what it is you're trying to stop, of course. So this story here, this is terrible. So far, there's been 15 official inquiries and investigations that seems really just to serve to delay only and to distract. There's been a report published by Christopher Rose that I'll post a link to on the CPS website of false convictions of a group of climate change protesters who concluded that failures by police and prosecutors to disclose information, essential information, to the defence were individual and not systematic, and that nothing I heard or suggest that there was anything deliberate, dishonest or withholding of information. Now, an interesting identical case to this is that another group of climate activists, on which the judge remarks that there was a total and complete failure to disclose information. So thus, Rose's finds look even more incredible. The biggest inquiry running into misconduct done by the Metropolitan Police of its 44 staff, difficulty is 75% of the people who are investigating this actually work for Metropolitan Police, and thus those two circles are highly likely to be crossed over by cross-contamination. So really it's going to be hard to find any kind of truth, any kind of fact in this, especially when those investigating themselves are indeed themselves. I mean, what kind of sense does that make? But then again, if you are the police and it's your job to go and investigate, and the people you're investigating is the people you work for, and they are in fact your best friends and your best mates and your work colleagues, what kind of real truth do you think there's ever going to be? And this is where we come full circle round to a story of John Jordan. He was told his conviction for occupying the offices of London was overturned. Now, the Crown Prosecution Services refuses to reveal why. But it's doubtless that it has something to do with the fact that Jordan's co-defendant turns out to be Jim Boyling, who in fact was a policeman working for the Metropolitan Police, who alleged used his false identity in court. Now, Jordan has made a further claim. He alleges that the same men who helped organise the street party that turned into the worst riot in London in June 1999 was actually organised by that said same person. That therefore means that the person who orchestrated the events of the protest and the violence that erupted from it actually was a policeman. Can you believe that? That would mean that the person who organised the event, who organised the protest, who got out on the streets and then committed the acts against the building, which is the London International Financial Futures Exchange, the LIFI building, of where derivatives were being traded from, the person who did that was a police officer from the inside. I mean, that's fucked up, that really is. The darker twist of the story, in fact, is that 42 people were seriously injured. There was over £1 million of property damage that occurred. Yet the police claimed they had no knowledge of the event going to occur. So the LIFI managed to claim on their insurance and get a full payout. Because the police police claimed they didn't know that there was going to be any kind of protest that was going to cause building damage. Clearly they knew what was going to happen, because it was planned from the inside. Now that information has now only just come out. So I think what really needs to happen here is some kind of an independent board of inquiry needs to get their teeth into this and sort this damn thing out. So the bigger picture really is, it's a serious, really serious situation where you have undercover officer working for the Metropolitan Police, planning a major demonstration that's ended up causing injuries, causing serious damage to property, and much, much more. Yet the police failed to operate upon this and actually didn't go in until 3 hours later. They didn't go in for 3 hours, so they let it happen. Which also then allowed the building then to claim on its insurance. Yet there's claim that they don't need an independent inquiry. I certainly think otherwise, I really do. And one of the key reasons I wanted to get Ash's points of view on this, if you can remember the stories what happened outside Occupy London and the St Paul's Cathedral stuff, was that certain people were heavily urinating and defecating on the steps of St Paul's Cathedral, where in fact the St Paul's Cathedral actually allowed them to stay. You know, they actually gave them a de facto permission. What was like, actually, we kind of get what you're doing, we kind of like it, just don't fuck around. And then of course all these things started happening. You started finding drugs down the side, and people were having sex in the fucking the aisle next to it, and like actually urinating and defecating. And so health and safety moved them on. And that kind of thing happened in Nottingham, where they were camped on the side of Market Square in the city. The stories that were coming out that were being used in the press were there was defecation, there was urine everywhere, there was unsanitary conditions, and they had to be moved on for health reasons and health protesting. So was this also being orchestrated from the inside in order to move them on for other reasons? You know, if there's no other reason, they're not causing a public problem, they're not causing a public nuisance, they're not blocking a highway, they're in fact being moved on for health reasons due to the unsanitary conditions. So was this information being leaked out? Was this kind of defecation being done intentionally? Or were the stories completely false? Now who knows, that's why I'd like to get Ash's comments on board to what actually happened on site, because of course he was there every day. I only visited there once or twice a week and so on. And so I'll be hoping to get his comments perhaps for the next show. Okay, so I'd really like Sylvia to come and join us on this conversation, because it is something that she has a deep interest in fact, because she has a BSc in Animal and Healthcare. That is her orientation of her college education. And this is regards to pets. So there was a journal article published last year. I actually only had the fortune to read today, and it was published by the University of Illinois. And this is
the nutritional sustainability of pet foods.
And this was published in 2013. So, and this really summarises: is pet ownership and pet food sustainable going forward in the future? Now, of course, me and you, Sylvia, we've chose not to have a pet here, haven't we?
We certainly have. We've discussed the pros and cons of having a pet and not having a pet. We've decided that between us, not having a pet is the better option in this.
Well, not just for ourselves, but for the pet itself. You know, I do not feel we have the time to give an animal the time, the nurture, the care and attention it needs. Whether that be a dog, a pet, or a fish, or an iguana, or whatever.
No, we don't. Certainly not in the things that need the major amount of care, such as like dogs and cats.
Yeah.
Even things that don't need that sort of care, they shouldn't really be with humans, like snakes, for example.
Well, they're just going to sit there in a glass cabinet and have a walk around. You might let them out and walk around a lamppost, for instance.
Well, the thing with
not lamppost,
snakes.
Yeah, it's really well. I said lamppost, right? You know what I was seeing in my head was like my friend Sean's picture, where he's got a snake out on his side, and it's kind of wrapped around his a lamp stand. You know, I said lamppost. I don't mean letting the snake outside the house. That's just dangerous. Sorry, but of course animals do get free.
Oh, of course they do. I had a friend who his parents kept venomous animals, and one of them got out, and he rang me up one day. He was really terrified because the one that had got out could kill a person if it got bit within about 10 minutes. So that sort of thing you don't really want in your house, not really.
Yeah, so this really is about sustainability. I mean, what was produced was by a researcher called Kelly Swanson. She is working in corporations with the Nutro company, who are a natural pet food maker. and they asked a number of questions for her to answer on the sustainability of pet ownership. Now, I mean, Sylvie, this is the reason I got you over here. I mean, do you think pet ownership is important for our survival? Is it and our going forward as a society? Do we need pets integrated with us permanently? Now, where I'm going with that really is in terms of food, in terms of like, because most people, we know, just looking at the case of the UK, most people can't even look after themselves right now. We're in a situation where, monetary-wise, economically-wise, we are struggling to survive ourselves in the current economic, socio-economic paradigm. So, can we really have sustainable level of enough food being produced for ourselves? Which the answer is currently no, sort of. And there are different discussions. How does pets fit around that? Can we feed all of our pets really, as a matter of survival, if we cannot feed ourselves? Is where I'm coming from with that.
Well, I mean, the reason we had pets in the first place, evolutionarily, was to help us gather our own food. With now, we don't really need that help. We don't need dogs to help us go out hunting, for example.
No, that's true.
But we do need to look after them because we have more and more animals, and a lot of them people are giving a human grade food to now, which animals don't really need that sort of grade.
Well, yeah, I think that's really brings up an important point there, is the grade of food, and that's really what Kelly points on in her journal article, is that there is huge amounts of people who are giving them human level food, and what's important by that is we're affecting our food system, our what do they call it, the food chain. Is that a lot of animals don't need that. People seem to think that we need to give our animals protein, huge amounts of stuff. We start giving them extra fibre and extra needs and extra nutrients and stuff. In their natural environment, animals wouldn't need that, and they shouldn't need that.
They don't. They need different levels of stuff than we do. So we start giving them our own food sources. We're just cutting out ourselves from our own food source, and there's no need for it.
Yeah, it's almost like artificially competing against our own human food system. I mean, you think about, so what's the current population now? 7.5 billion people?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I think the UN said that by 2050 it's going to be 9 billion and going upwards exponentially. So you're going to have soon very direct opposition, not just current opposition, which generally is, I can still go to the shop and buy pet food at the moment. 20 years' time, that food is going to be the same food as ours, in that same sense.
Well, what should happen is that they should give the animals that can't survive on their own in the wild. For dogs are a good example of that, because they will not be able to survive without human companionship anymore. Is to give them, say, our leftovers, which is what we used to do.
Yeah.
And their immune systems will be perfectly fine with it. It won't hurt them at all.
I mean, dogs and cats require specific nutrients, not ingredients. So it's possible to meet the nutritional requirements using a wide variety of nutrient sources. Now, some of the research that has brought forward has been shown that even kittens fed on different proteins, the carbohydrate ratio remains the same, and the pet is indeed healthy. What that means is you can actually alternatives to the meat system to certain animals. Like the cat specifically, of course, they require meat all the time. But I mean, animal protein can be replaced with plant protein, which requires sustainably less water and less energy to produce. And the soy-based proteins are a common pet food ingredient anyway, so their production is 20 times more efficient in terms of their fossil fuel requirements, according to her paper.
Yes, what people don't realise a lot is that dogs don't actually need meat. Dogs are omnivorous. So you can conceivably change a dog's diet to that sort of vegetarian diet.
Yeah, you could.
But a cat does need meat because it needs a certain amino acid that it can only get from it.
Yeah, that's right. The pet food industry also is worth 55 billion worldwide. So, I mean, you think if they adopted sustainable practices, that could actually bring the value of producing it down while keeping the same economic level. Now, of course, the growth is that you must make more people using it in its current system. So the meat industry must make more than it did last year. which is
Yeah.
just insane. But that's a different topic entirely. And when it comes to sustainability in that regards, I mean, how do you minimise, say, environmental impact?
Well, the thing is, with things like cat food, they're made out of things like chicken, beef, fish, all the kind of animals that we would consume. Now, for sustainability, I'd have to think about all those kinds of animals all being bred for the same purposes as for human consumption, but for the cats. Can you imagine how many more meat farms there'd have to be? They'd have to put them in things like battery farming. You know battery farming, don't you? When the chickens are kept in absolutely appalling conditions.
Of course, but that's already happening with the likes of, of pork and beef and lambs and stuff. They are kept in those conditions. Although, of course, if you go to the supermarket, it's all pictures of cows in the fields. I don't even think that actually happens anymore.
Oh, of course. Well, they don't label that sort of thing so that you buy it, so that you don't know.
No. Here's a picture of a shed.
Yeah.
On your back of Dairy Lee. That's not going to happen. I mean, one of the interesting things, of course, is that cats don't self-regulate their food intake. Cats will fucking eat everything. Because cats instinctively don't actually know where they're going to get their next meal.
No, so they will eat everything that they come across because they don't know if they'll get any more.
Yeah.
Same with dogs. If you leave food out for a dog, if you leave a big bag of food, the dog will try and eat the entire bag. Because it's instinct. They have to regulate. The human has to regulate their food intake.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think how do you formulate a strategy to increase the sustainability for pets in the future? I actually think it's really, really hard. I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, in New Zealand there was a campaign called Cats to Go, which was aiming to ban all cats from the country due to the fact that they are a direct competition food source in New Zealand because there's that many of the fuckers.
Bloody hell! I didn't realise that was going on.
Yeah, so I think that was like 2009 that happened. Yeah.
The thing is, you have the other problem where if they start banning pets because they are a competitive food source for humans, what's going to happen is people are just going to throw their pets out onto the streets. So then we'll have wild dogs and feral cats, and that's going to cause loads more problems.
Well, that happened back in the 60s, wasn't it? Where there was like all the circuses had to get rid of their animals, and they just let them go.
That's right, yeah. Because they had nothing else to do with them. They couldn't do anything else.
No,
with
they didn't
them.
want to send them back to like India or Africa. It'd be far too expensive. So they literally just let them go in the woods. I mean, that was the case of the man monkey. It was a Shropshire Canal where it was assumed, of course, it was like the British Bigfoot. Whereas by assumption, it means that what it actually was, the gorilla, was released by a zoo. It literally lives in the canal area. And there's loads of stories wrote about that during like the last 10, 15 years. There was like this ape-man thing that was shining eyes that ultimately vanished into the night whenever people saw it.
Oh, of course. Did they find it because it died then?
I think I have to be. I'm not completely 100% sure whether they found it or not. I think they did. I'll have to find out. I mean, there was a book published by what was his name, Nick Redfern, about 3 or 4 years ago. He wrote his search of the British Bigfoot, the man monkey. So yeah, go check that out if you can find it online or whatever.
Alright, oh look. Well, pets do play an important role in our society, so we really need to look at sustaining their food consumption as best we can, because there's a lot of emotional and health benefits to actually having pets in the homes.
We certainly do. I don't think there's any good or bad practices. We just have to be more or less sustainable.
Well, that's it, and it'll be a good idea to help educate people into not overfeeding their pets, because it's so easy to do.
Well, yeah, pet obesity, it's probably more endemic than our own.
If you guys want to have a look at this study, we're going to put a link to it below. This is something new that we're doing at Rabbit Hole That Is Reality. We're seeking to spread awareness of current campaigns that we can all get behind and share. These two, we feel, amongst many others, need to be highlighted. We're just going to focus on these two. The links are below in the description and also on our website at rabbitholethatisreality.co.uk. The first one is to sign now for a Frack-Free UK, which is by Greenpeace.
Under current law, companies need permission from landowners beneath land they drill The ministers have admitted they're looking for ways to overhaul trespassing laws to make it easier for energy companies to explore for shale gas. So speak up and sign now. And this website is from Greenpeace, so go over to greenpeace.org.uk. You can see the campaign on there for a Frack-Free UK. Please, David Cameron, please reconsider your position on hydraulic fracking immediately and instead champion clean energy sources that do not risk our global climate, our natural environment and our health. Please sign now.
The other campaign is from the Some of Us. This one's called Fructose, the Healthier Choice.
They're fighting for people over profits. This is now in regards to the Food Standards Agency, where companies such as Coca-Cola, companies who are using fructose as a cheap alternative to using sugar. It's so bad for your health, it's actually been banned in many countries. What is bizarre is the EU is going to allow the likes of Nestle and Coca-Cola to claim that they're now healthier for us should it contain fructose. Cereal bars, chocolate, soft drinks. Now, it's not the first time that some of us have actually gone up against the big corporations and actually won. So we really need you to get behind this, guys. You know, there's lots more information out there on the health claim that fructose is allowed to be in the UK. Obesity experts are appalled the fact that the EU is even considering a move to using fructose. You know, in America particularly, that fructose corn syrup is in everything. And it's so bad for you. I mean, you can't help but look at the society on the health reports and stuff and how bad this stuff is. I know best they are campaigning, they are lobbying the government to allow it to happen in the EU. We don't want that to happen.
No, definitely not.
Nor should you. So please, get on board with this. So dear Food Standards Agency, don't allow the companies, really, big food, to mislead consumers on the health benefits of fructose when it's completely fraudulent to say so. That is from Some of Us. Please join these two campaigns. I don't care if you do anything else. I want you to do more. But if you do anything else, sign these two campaigns. It's just your full name and your email address. Super simple, easy to do, guys. Super simple. I mean, even the armchair activists can do this. It's that simple.
Yeah, it is. All you got to do is go on a site and sign up.
It's not sign up, it's just sign your name. Come on, guys, get it done. Get it done. Start waiting for someone else to do it, because no one else is going to save you. So it's time to look at the weird and the wonderful, the world of the Fortean, and to continue looking at the rabbit hole that is reality. A woman has reportedly thrown out her cat on the streets for being gay. That's right, a bizarre tale that can only be found in this world. Basically, a 7-year-old moggy by the name of Bull has been cast out apparently for having homosexual tendencies towards the other male cats in the house. This middle-aged woman, who was the cat's owner, says that he engaged in unnatural sexual behaviour and was making advances towards the other male cats in the house, even though female cats were present. The woman then told a newspaper that she finds the behaviour to be disturbing and a contradiction of the laws of nature, and that anyone interested in this gay cat can have it, because I have no further use for it. A study has found that short people are prone to actually being paranoid. They have a paranoia because they're short, for no other reason. It kind of reminds me of remember the fucking dogs, Sylvia? Not terriers, what are the little fuckers called?
Chihuahuas, little tiny ones.
I'm scared of everything! And you can see these people walking in the streets with their fucking chihuahua under their arm, and it's sat there fucking going, Aah!
Yeah.
Like it's fucking...
It looks out and shivers at everything.
Oh my god, it's a person! Shit, let's fucking go somewhere.
It's 20 times the size of me. I'm scared.
It's the kind of the same thing. This actually comes out of an actual scientific study in the Psychiatry Research Journal, where scientists have been able to show that a person's height that is actually lower than them makes people feel worse about themselves and fearful that others are going to bring harm to them. A study on self-esteem can lead to paranoid thinking, scientists have said. And being tall is associated with greater career and relationship success, and height is seen to convey authority. When we feel taller, we feel more powerful, and that was by Daniel Freeman of Britain's University of Oxford, who led the study. This was all tested in VR as well, because I'd like to see some of the results of that. It sounds pretty cool. So Sylvia, what do you think about UFOs? Do you think they're real?
Yeah, they're definitely real. I mean, they just means unidentified flying objects. There's certainly a lot of those out there.
Do you believe in alien, of an extraterrestrial origin, shall we say?
A few of them are probably of that origin, I'd say.
Okay, fair enough. So, like myself, I tend to think most of them are classified military projects, personally. But, yeah, apparently this, you see, a UFO has actually been captured in a photograph by NASA, but the photograph was actually taken on Mars.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this was an interesting picture. The way that it goes, really, it's an image. It's on NASA's website. The link will be below, and you can have a look at that. The enlargement of the object appears to be a spherical top-coned object, and it's at a center mass. There looks like some kind of propellant being ejected from the tail, so it actually looks like it's going through the atmosphere, as it's in the atmosphere, but it actually has the cloud vapor trail behind it. But of course, the curiosity is on Mars. So what's the object, and what is it? And it's clearly moving. It's clear, obviously, it was moving in the picture. So what is it? Who knows? UFO on Mars? Swamp gas from Venus. So more likely of the consideration there's going to be a meteorite flying through the atmosphere, skimming across.
Yeah, more than likely it'll be something like that.
That's the most likely scenario. It's highly unlikely it's going to be an alien ship flying through the atmosphere. It's also unlikely that, of course, it's another aerial object from Earth been sent to Mars. So it's more than likely going to be some kind of,
It's more likely to be some sort of celestial object.
That's the way I was trying to think of celestial object. It could, of course, be Korea. Of course, they've made it to the Sun recently. They could, of course, have made it to the Mars as well.
on the return flight.
Yeah, we thought we'd skip past the Earth. The story, of course, that was an onion-like story from a place in Ireland. Of course, they made it all the way to the Sun.
Yeah.
18 minutes, apparently.
Really happen. In 18 minutes? What? People think that was real.
What, it got reported everywhere? But yeah, so maybe this UFO, in fact, is Koreans on Mars.
Maybe.
And to leave us on something that I think is going to be quite interesting for a lot of people, is that what if the prototype for Noah's Ark was actually real? What? What are you gonna? I know what you're saying. You're saying, what the fuck? What the fuck are you talking about? Noah's Ark? Fuck off. I don't blame you, because that's exactly how I think as well. But I recently discovered 4,000-year-old clay tablet from Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, reveals striking details of a story similar to the one of Noah, complete with detailed instructions on building a round vessel known as a coracle, that, in fact, it had instructions actually etched into the side of it. 2 by 2, the animals go in. The tablet has actually gone on display in the British Museum on Friday, and engineers will actually be following the ancient instructions to see whether the vessel could actually have sailed. And there's actually a new book coming out by Irving Finkel. He's the museum's assistant and keeper of the Middle East, and he's also the man who translated the tablet. Now, Finkel actually got hold of this a few years ago from a man who brought him a damaged tablet that he'd acquired in the Middle East in World War II. It was light brown, it was about the size of a mobile phone, and it has the jagged cuneiform script, which is the script of the ancient Mesopotamian, the Anunnaki. It turns out that Finkel, so on Friday, is possibly the most human-important documents ever discovered. The discovery that the boat is round. Now, anyone who's read the Epic of Gilgamesh, which again is from the Anunnaki texts, talks of a vessel that is coated, that has it's cylindrical in shape, that is, it's covered on top effectively, a coracle, and is then covered in bitumen, and has wooden ribs. Now, I happen to think this is actually what he's describing. I don't know whether this guy has read the Epic of Gilgamesh, but you'd think a person in his position would have. Now, of course, he's quoting the fact that it's actually talking about the boat of Noah. Now, the tablet records the Mesopotamian gods' instructions on building the giant vessel that is 2/3 the size of what we call a soccer field, made of rope and enforced with his wooden ribs. Now, a documentary actually is going to be filmed and broadcast later this year on the attempt of making this. Interesting. How cool is that? So that's actually happening right now. So I actually am really looking forward to seeing what happens with this. But does this actually mean that it's real? If these were instructions from God, or a god, or a Mesopotamian god rather, 2,000 or 4,000 years ago, does that mean the Epic of Gilgamesh actually happened? Does that mean that the story of Noah might actually have some truth to it? Because, of course, most of the books in the Bible are actually based on earlier texts from around that part of the world. Most of it has, particularly like the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Anunnaki texts and so on. Certainly, if you look through any of the books from Zechariah Sitchin, you'll find that certainly is quite a prevalent accord how the Bible and many of the books of that time are actually based on much earlier forms. And you can see how they've progressed through time to that point where they were wrote into the quote-unquote the Bible. So, but the idea of a flood that is causing sins among us, as he says here, is actually still alive among us, in fact. And he points out about the local UKIP councillor who made headlines recently for saying that Britain's storms were actually caused by the legalisation of gay marriage. And he actually, Finkel says here, had they known it, that certainly would have gone into the preface of the book. So here, that's where we're going to leave it tonight, guys. We've pretty much locked on the hour. This is the rabbit hole that is reality. I'm going to say goodbye to you. Have a good night. My name is Kristian Lander. Make sure you come by the website www.rabbitholethatisreality.co.uk. Tweet me, that is @DefineChristian. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Google+. I'm a happily-go-lucky guy. Come and talk to me, tell me what you have to say. Want to have any discussions or anything we've been talking about here tonight, all the links and descriptions are below and are on our website. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the Rabbit Hole that is Reality, episode 19. See you next time.